Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of StreamTime Sports. My name is Chris Stone. I'm the community lead at Sports Pro Media, and unlike always, I'm not joined by our CEO, Nick Meacham, today. He's feeling a little bit under the weather, so whether it's on LinkedIn, email, maybe you've got him on WhatsApp, just make sure to drop him a message, make sure he's feeling better. But that does not mean that we will not be putting out a great podcast for you today, because at Sports Pro, the content never sleeps. So today we're actually going to take a look back at a topic that is very similar to the first podcast that I ever did on StreamTime, which was looking at the metaverse. 2 years ago, we were joined by Charlie Beal at IMG to talk about everything that he saw in the metaverse. And at the time, we were just coming out of COVID. Web3 was booming. Everyone was talking about NFTs, and the metaverse was kind of the next piece of that puzzle that we thought was going to come. And to Charlie's credit, he talked about, the difference between being an early adopter versus a late mover. And his prediction was it is absolutely going to be something, but how soon that will be, it's probably more medium and long term than it is short term. And 2 years on, that does seem to be the case. That's not to say that metaverse technology hasn't been adopted and more people aren't using it, but it's not necessarily boomed from that 2 year period when we first started talking about this. But looking forward to 2024, Apple releasing their goggles, Meta continuing to put in more money in this space, it does seem like next year could be a launching point or a new era for the metaverse to really take a step forward. And that doesn't mean that some sports organizations haven't already been testing this and preparing for this. So for today's podcast, we're going to look at a trio of interviews that we did at the Sports Pro Ignition event last month. And we're going to hear from 3 different organizations on how they are currently approaching the metaverse. This includes what they're doing from a broadcast perspective, a sponsorship and marketing perspective, including what they're doing from fan engagement, how all these different pieces can be tied in through the metaverse. So in this episode, you're going to get to hear from 3 different individuals. You'll hear from Kenny Gersh, who's the EVP of Media and Business at Major League Baseball, Neil Armit, who's the Chief Commercial Officer at the RNA, and Ann Develston, who's the Senior Director of Digital and Emerging Content at the PGA Tour. All 3 of these have very interesting case studies on what they're doing in the metaverse today, and hopefully it'll bring you some inspiration or some insights into how some different sports organizations are currently trying to leverage some of that technology and bring in new fans that may not already be there. So I hope you guys enjoy the rest of this episode, and we're going to start off hearing from Kenny Gersh of Major League Baseball.
First thing I really wanted to dig into and jump straight into it is really about this new initiative you've launched at the MLB, which is the Virtual Ballpark. So could you just talk to the audience really about what that is and why you guys are really taking it such a big step into sort of the virtual world, I suppose?
Sure. So the Virtual Ballpark is, essentially what it sounds like. It's a digital space that can host thousands of fans concurrently for a live event. So what we did is created a representative Major League Baseball ballpark that we can bring people together and sort of bring that experience of attending a ball game to fans across the globe. So what does that mean? It sort of looks like a stadium. You are represented in this digital space by an avatar, which at the moment we have some fairly generic avatars that you can add some customization to represent your favorite team and, the different looks and hats and clothing that you can wear in there. You can then sort of run around and explore the ballpark grounds. There's different areas in the concourse. There's trivia games. There's scavenger hunts. And then at the center is a baseball field where we can put on a live event. So the first thing we did was actually the celebrity softball game back in July, which is an event that we hosted around the All-Star game. And that was more of a 2D experience where they were streaming the broadcast of the celebrity softball game on the sort of big screens within the ballpark. And then we had hosts within the ballpark that were guiding fans and sort of explaining them the types of things they can do and how to participate in a scavenger hunt that we had for so rare cards and trivia contests and other things. And that was a really interesting step or an interesting first sort of initiative. The next thing that we did just last week was to actually take our 3D game day technology, which is something that we use in our mobile apps and our website to create sort of a virtual representation of the action on the field and bring that to life within the ballpark setting. So there were actual lifelike avatars of the players on the field in real time, sort of, representing what was happening on the field to play. So you had the pitcher throwing the ball, the hitter swinging, running. And then with your avatar, you were able to stand in different locations on the field, sort of in places that you never would be able to do as a fan in real life during a live game, sort of in foul territory, watching the digital representation of the game on the field, and also to see the broadcast on the scoreboards above you, sort of the way you would in a real stadium. And what's really cool about this technology, the thing I like the best, is the sort of spatial audio feature. So that, Nick, if you and I were both in this ballpark together, standing next to each other, we could talk and hear each other. And then you would also hear the rumblings and noise of other people in the stadium, which gives you that sort of social feeling of being at a ballpark and watching a game and enjoying a game together. It's actually, something that everyone watching us now can appreciate, and that we are actually participating in a virtual conference. So one day you could do this conference in our ballpark, and you and I could be represented sort of on the field or a different area in the ballpark. Your conference attendees could be sitting and actually talking with each other and networking and interacting and bringing a lot of the things that you do in a real life conference to a global audience together. So I think there's really a lot of potential for what this thing could become, but we're at the very, very early, just sort of testing stages of it right now.
So in terms of accessibility, I mean, it sounds interesting, and the whole opportunity around virtual and digital engagement for fan bases to try these sorts of experiences, get them closer to what's going on the live experiences is so paramount to what everyone's focused on in the industry right now. In terms of the accessibility point, how did you get fans into that platform and into that experience? And so perhaps also talk about who were you working with to get that to life, because it sounds like it's a pretty big piece of work to get off the ground.
Yeah, so first of all, I'll give a shout out to it's a company called Improbable that we're working to build this. They have a long history in sort of the gaming space and have been working with other, I know it's a topic we're going to get into in a little bit later, but sort of Web3 based companies, particularly they help to build the initial version of the Other Side platform that is one of the main sort of metaverses that are starting to pop up out there. What's interesting about the technology is that it allows for, at least in our ballpark, up to 15,000 concurrent users to be in there at once, all interacting and talking, which from a technological standpoint of allowing that many individual instances in one concurrent environment is actually a huge number that's really never been done before. But in the schemes of our media landscape, it's a relatively small number, or very small number. So for us, we've really just started with these sort of two, relatively low stake events that I mentioned before. Celebrity softball, which, although an interesting event, isn't our biggest all-star event. And then we did a regular season game between the Angels and the Rays last week. Again, it wasn't a game that had a lot of playoff implications, but we had two teams that were both very interested and eager to participate in this test. So that really worked out for us. And then we did some light marketing to their fans. We put it on our website. If you went to the game day, the traditional game day that day, there was a link to go check this out. We did some social media marketing. I sort of put it out to my own personal network of in the social media, and we got some people in there. So we got a good number for what we were looking for, which was really what I wanted for now, was some early adopters to come in and sort of kick the tires and check it out and then let us know what they thought. And so by that measure, it was a huge success for us. We got pretty close to the number that it can handle coming into the ballpark, which was great. People who came in stayed. They were there for upwards of 20 to almost 30 minutes on average, which was great. They weren't just coming in and like, I don't know what this is, and leaving. It let us sort of see how things worked. Like, one of the things I was talking about before is you could stand on the field and watch the game, but it got a little crowded down there. So it was a little, we have to figure out a better way to, like, how can you stand in different places? So we learned sort of a lot and be able to, like, choose different camera angles that are more stationary cameras, as opposed to, I want to be able to let the fan feel like they're standing at shortstop, and what does it look like when the ball is coming at them? So those are all sort of improvements that we're going to be working on for next year to sort of evolve this product.
And so what is the roadmap you guys are looking at with a product like that? Is the goal to be at every match and have that availability for people to access that type of opportunity anywhere in the world for every match, or is it sort of just starting slowly and seeing what you guys can put together in the next season or so, and slowly building step by step?
Those are good questions, and they're questions that we're asking ourselves internally right now. The phase that we're in right now is just the experimentation phase and putting it out there and seeing how it works. long term, I could see it becoming just an element of how we deliver games. So as we already are pretty big in the direct to consumer space with MLB.TV, where fans can come in and buy out of market games. So this could potentially be a sort of premium offering to that, or just become part of the platform that you could either watch a traditional broadcast or you could watch the social broadcast with your friends. So, we've been approached over the years a lot by different sort of watch party platforms or initiatives, and none of them really excited me that much because it was like, I don't know, it's just sort of like me and you being on the phone while we're watching a game. But this one really sort of brings it together in a way that I think is exciting by having that ability to have the whole crowd sort of there with you together and the ability to walk around and do other things. So I could see that as part of our platform. And then as we start working with our national partners in different ways to enhance their broadcasts, to work with them to put postseason games on there at some point. So really just making it the fabric of what our digital offerings are. Like digital just offers us so many opportunities to do things differently and to add new engagement opportunities to our fans. So this is one way that we're experimenting with, hey, instead of just having a lean back experience of watching the game, here's a lean forward experience, like come in and actually participate and, have things to do that keep your attention focused on baseball and having a conversation around it as opposed to trying to do different other things. So we'll see. It may work, it may not work, but these are certainly the types of things that we want to test out and see where they go.
So something like this obviously sits into the Web3 kind of space where you've been, I remember talking to you last time, you were very bullish on the value that this can potentially bring to the sports industry as a whole. Just talk us through how you're looking at your Web3 strategy right now, including the relationship with SoRare, which you touched upon briefly as part of that scavenger hunt. Like, what are you guys looking at that Web3 can bring to the table that perhaps wasn't available in the traditional means that you had available?
Sure. So I'm in an interesting position at baseball. I'm fortunate to be so, where I oversee both media and business development. And then within business development, falls what you call our sort of Web3 strategy, which it's always sort of tricky to put specific labels on things like where did Web 2 end and where did Web 3 start. I guess when you say Web 3, people mostly think about the blockchain and sort of what effect that can have on the different ways people interact. So for me personally, I was attracted to the space because I think the underlying tech of being able to validate individual ownership of digital assets is really interesting and important and sort of exciting and unlocks a lot of opportunities for us. And the early adopters of that technology so far are just extremely passionate about it, which is great. And I think I think there's a reason for that, which I'll come back to. But I think when you take sort of that passion with the passion that people have for their local baseball team or for baseball as a whole and sort of marry it together, there are a lot of things that we can do and create sort of a nice sort of flywheel from there. So again, what I think, going back to sort of Web3 in general, what's really cool about it is you have this ability to have this ownership of a digital asset that didn't really, happen before, wasn't available to people before. And once you become an owner, you have sort of a vested interest in the success of that asset, and you become an advocate and you become passionate about it. And I think that can really help, us as a sport to sort of grow and to have our fans become marketing engines for us and bring more people into the game. So I think we have to find that sort of right mix of how do we marry these two things together. SoRare is one example of that. We actually have a couple different partners in this space. So Candy, for instance, is our traditional collectible Web3 partner. And I'm really excited about a lot of the things they're doing. So talking about that ownership of digital assets, what I think is really cool is this sort of concept of a digital ticket stub that they've done, where, in the old days, you would go to a game, you'd have a paper ticket, it would get ripped or whatever, and you would have this memento that, yes, I was at that no-hitter, or I was at, game 4 of the ALCS when the Red Sox started their comeback against the Yankees. So to have that memento is really important for our fans. It's something that they feel that connection with. And that's sort of going away in the digital space as we've moved almost completely now to digital tickets. So now we can create a commemorative ticket, and it's not just the JPEG, it's not just an image, it's actually something that shows that you, Nick, own this ticket. And it was given to you because you attended this particular game. So now you have that evidence that you were there. Now, just with the same with the old paper tickets, if it happens to have value because it was a particularly memorable game or exciting event, there may be a market where you can buy and sell it, but that's not the point of it. The point of it is for you to have that momentum, that collectible, that evidence that you were there. And so we've tested that with a lot of the jewel events, meaning the All-Star game and our postseason games. We've allowed clubs to do that at special event games. And we actually even did it for the virtual stadium. So if you were at the celebrity softball game, you were then sent a virtual ticket, again, that was unique to you. It was in your specific wallet that showed that you were there. You were there at the beginning when this virtual ballpark, which is how everybody in the year 2030 is now experiencing baseball games, you were at the very first event. And I think that's a cool thing to have. So Rare takes that concept of digital ownership and marries it with fantasy, which has been, a long-standing way that we at baseball have been able to provide more engagement to our fans where they participate in fantasy contests. And what's really cool about bringing digital ownership to that is if you're passionate about Ohtani, for instance, you could buy his card. It's not just a matter of drafting him for that one particular contest on a day or even a season. You now have Ohtani and can use his card in their gaming mechanics this year, next year, the year after. For as long as Ohtani plays, you'll have that. And if, he has a particularly historic year like he had this year, and you have the 2023 Ohtani card that you use in the game, that becomes a collectible in and of itself. So it marries a lot of those things together. What I also think is cool is young players. You have a guy coming up that maybe is on your favorite team. You don't think he's getting the national recognition he deserves yet, but he's going to be a star. Buy his So Rare card. When it's undervalued, you can use it at the game. As that player progresses, he'll perform better for you in your fantasy games, and you'll create that, again, that attachment, that passion, because you are vested in the interest and success of that particular player that you own. So I think it's a really interesting example of taking that digital ownership, combining it with the passion, combining it with the gaming mechanics to create a really nice, virtuous cycle for us at baseball to engage with our fans.
Yeah, completely. And we've seen obviously a lot of different examples of NFTs and indeed what So Rare's been doing on the fantasy side, which has been really interesting to watch. I mean, one of the things that's been interesting to watch it across from an industry-wide perspective is to see some of, the air being taken out, or the oxygen being taken out of the initial excitement that was around the NFT Web3 space. And now it's sort of calmed down into this sort of sense of everyone's kind of watching now to see what is next with this whole sector. What's your take on the future of the things like NFTs and so forth? You obviously sound quite supportive and bullish on it. There's some great examples the MLB is already implementing. Is it just being taking a very pragmatic approach and who you partner with and what sort of things you do roll out? Because you can't just do endless initiatives in this space. You have to be careful with what fans really want to get and what's going to build a relationship with them that's meaningful.
Yeah, so for me, and because I'm old, it reminds me a lot of the sort of early days of the internet and sort of the early .com boom and then sort of the evolution of what happened there. And I remember back in the late 90s or early 2000s, my date's a little bit off, but you had AOL was the powerhouse and Yahoo, and you had companies like Excite and Lycos and Alta Vista and Pets.com and there's sort of a million more. And everyone sort of saw the promise of the internet and was trying to sort of figure out how to best monetize that and bring experience to users, and things sort of got ahead of itself. And then you had a little bit of the .com bust, but that all paved the way for the Amazons of the world and Google and even what Apple sort of morphed into at this point. To have these companies and Facebook or Meta or whatever they're called now. But you have these giants that sort of stood on the shoulders of those guys that sort of came before and paved the way. So I think we're in that zone where there is a technology here that makes a lot of sense and has a ton of promise in blockchain and being able to, again, authenticate that ownership of digital assets. And people were all rushing to it without really knowing what the real use cases were. And there was a lot of just put it on the blockchain. And my question was always, well, why? Like, are we doing it just to do it, to say we're doing it? I want to do things that really makes sense. And again, that's why I'm proud of what we've done so far with Candy in particular, and creating things that I think have value for their own sake, like a unique card, a unique ticket, a unique highlight of a special moment that you as a fan want to own. And not that you're speculating on someone else buying it from you at a higher price, but just it has value in and of itself, and we're delivering that value to our consumers. And I think that'll continue to evolve. And again, I think that sort of flywheel effect that I talked about before, figuring out ways where we can create, ownership in these assets and then reward people for that. And I think there's a strategy that'll develop over the next couple of years of this token gated access to events and merchandise and content. And so if you, Nick, have in your wallet particular digital assets that you acquired over time, either, again, like I said before, you were at the celebrity softball game virtually, so you have that ticket in your wallet. You watched MLB.TV at a certain period of time, or maybe you watched, I think it was last night or the night before, I think it was last night, where Acuna stole his 70th base. He became the first 40 home run, 70th stolen base guy in MLB history. You watched that game live on MLB.TV, so we sent you a token to represent that sort of the fact that you were there virtually. So that's in your wallet. You have a couple SoRare cards in your wallet. Maybe Topps put out a digital collectible, and you have that in your wallet. And we're like, okay, Nick is this particular fan. We're going to reward him with free access to MLB.TV, or we're going to create an exclusive, player meet and greet with Acuna, and have you go and be able to talk to him in our virtual ballpark or otherwise. And sort of, there's a lot of technology there that can be utilized in really, I think, smart and interesting ways to reward our fans for their engagement with us, and sort of, give them experiences that are appropriate to them. And then again, get them to engage more so they can get more experiences and create that cycle. So I think the technology is really interesting and will become important over the years, but it's early and it's hard for people to understand. And people sort of saw some of the inflated values of these things, and then they came back to earth and they're like, oh, see, I knew all along it wasn't, right. It is right. And it's going to develop over time. And I think in a couple of years, it'll all sort of feel second nature to people. But right now, the onboarding in particular, and what I mean is getting set up and being able to create, own a digital asset and have that ownership of it, is really complicated. And that needs to get better. And again, with Candy and with SoRare, I think we've done a good job where you can just sort of go and the way you interact on the web and usual, and obtain these assets and have them sort of in your account, as opposed to always needing a crypto wallet or being able to understand how MetaMask or these things that the normal baseball fan doesn't know what they mean. So I think that'll continue to develop and get better over the years.
Yeah, definitely. I think rewarding is the key word there that you use, because I think that if we can unlock the rewarding aspects for fans to be engaging with sports properties, that's where I think the dynamic of the fan relation can only be enhanced in a world where sometimes in some sports properties have a real challenge with the perception of fans in that economy that they exist.
Hello, everyone. Just a brief interruption. If you enjoy the StreamTime Sports podcast, then you should consider joining us at Sports Pro Madrid. It is a truly global event with over 1,000 attendees representing some of the most influential teams, leagues, broadcasters, and tech vendors. This is the perfect opportunity to learn and network with other sports executives on all things digital media and strategy. As our loyal listeners to the podcast, we want to offer you a discounted pass to the event. If you go to the Sports Pro Madrid website and purchase a ticket, you will receive a 20% discount using the StreamTime discount. When going to check out, please type in the word, all one word, StreamTime20. That is StreamTime and then the number 20. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of the podcast, and we hope to see you in Madrid. Next up, we'll be hearing from Neil Armit, the Chief Commercial Officer at the RNA, on a very interesting case study of hosting the first virtual major in golf.
My name's Richard Johnson, founder of Sports 3.0 and explorer in all things future fan engagement. And I'm joined by Neil Armit, Chief Commercial Officer of the RNA, who will be giving us all the insights into this project and the RNA's approach to innovation and disruption. Hey, Neil, how are you doing?
I'm really good, Rich. Yeah, no, great to have the opportunity to talk on the subject and to be part of today's discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know about you, but I love the fact that we're on the disruptor stage. I think it probably sets up this conversation quite nicely from things that we've spoken about previously.
Does indeed. Yeah, absolutely.
Could you just start with a bit of context and a little bit about your role at the RNA, just so we know your place in all of this and the RNA's journey?
Yeah, sure, no problems. And so, I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at the RNA. For those that don't know as much about the RNA, so the RNA is the global governing body for golf outside of the US and Mexico. Our probably important place to start is our core objective as an organisation is actually to make golf more accessible, appealing, and inclusive. We're based up in St Andrews, so very lucky that we get to be in a beautiful part of the world at the home of golf. We occupy a very sort of unique position and have a strong profile within the sport. And it's really about how we are trying to inspire and influence and engage people all over the world to take up and follow sport. So the RNA has a pretty broad set of responsibilities. So everything from managing and governing the rules of golf to developing the sport around the world to staging a whole range of amateur and professional championships, and that includes the AIG Women's Open and the Open.
You don't have much on your plate then?
It definitely keeps me busy, and it's certainly been a very interesting time for golf. Over the last 12-24 months as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I wanted to touch on that. I think it's such an exciting time for golf. And when I first saw this project, it seemed really interesting. The first major in the metaverse, as obviously it's coined. But can you give us a little short summary about the project, how it came about, and ultimately, what it was designed to do?
Yeah, no problem. And it probably goes back to explaining a little bit about the RNA and our core objective as well. And so if I go back to that point about that, we're predominantly focused actually on making the game of golf more accessible, appealing, and inclusive. And we certainly felt that the VR golf and technology was another significant way to make golf more accessible and appealing, and actually to potentially part of our work about attracting kind of a younger generation, the next generation. That VR golf provided another one of those avenues and those opportunities for us. And when you look at it, both in terms of the cost of playing golf and the time commitment that's required, that actually both of those are relatively minimal when playing sort of VR golf. So that assists with the accessibility point, but also it fits within what we've seen. And certainly there's been a real explosion of this through COVID and post COVID, is that VR golf features in this this broader trend that we're actually seeing, which is significant levels of off course golf being played versus more of the traditional kind of on course formats. So driving ranges, simulators, adventure golf, are all we're seeing real massive kind of increases in people playing off course golf that's getting them interested in the sport. And then actually we're seeing them sort of transfer across and wanting to play, on some of the more sort of traditional kind of formats as well. And that's gone as far as that we're actually seeing in some markets now that off-course golf is actually exceeding the numbers of people playing on-course golf as well. And some really fascinating bits when you look at some of those markets or countries, somewhere like South Korea, they're actually seeing far more indoor golf being played than actually outdoor golf. So it's a really, I suppose, a very interesting area for us as we sort of look at how off-course golf and VR golf becomes also a feeder for people to become interested in playing on-course golf as well. And then lastly, I think what we've also seen from all of the trends is that what we're also seeing is that it's attracting a significantly younger audience, almost on average sort of 15 years younger than the traditional player versus the player that's now playing off all of these different formats of off-course golf. it's 50% more likely to be women that are playing off-course golf, and actually we're seeing twice as likely that there'll be non-white as well. So that point about accessibility, inclusivity, the appeal that off-course golf and then certainly kind of VR golf are providing opportunities to draw more people into the game, create more interest, see them playing more of the traditional formats, but also helping, I think to foster their interest and consumption of all things that are going on within golf currently.
Those stats are pretty amazing, aren't they? 15 years younger than the sort of normal player, and amazing, increases around diversity and inclusivity. I think, to me, it provides real food for thought in terms of for other, sports and rights holders or brands on the call that these things are on the session, that these things are real routes to, increasing the holy grail of fan engagement, with younger audiences and more diverse audiences. Amazing.
I think that's absolutely right. And I know even from an R&A perspective that we would probably have, historically judged the health of the sport by, how many people were playing, traditional, on-course golf and the numbers of members within clubs, and, the reality now is actually that, the game is thriving, but the game is thriving as much, because people are coming into the sport through that off-course means, and then, it's creating and connecting them into, to become passionate about the sport. They're consuming more of the game, but then also, have an interest in playing in more sort of traditional formats. So I think the R&A's, whole view on this is that becomes an incredibly important sort of feeder route in, something definitely that we're trying to embrace with all of the, with all of the guidance and the advice that we are providing to our affiliates around the world as well.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. So one thing we haven't done, but we should, let's just maybe 30 seconds, give a little summary of how this major in the metaverse worked. So it was, again, obviously we talked a lot about VR golf, but it's through, if I'm not mistaken, through Oculus headsets with a key partner, and run over a period of about 6 weeks. And it was effectively replicating a major experience. But just touch on that. Give us a quick summary.
Yeah, sure. So we partnered with Golf 5. So they already had developed a very sort of immersive and authentic VR game. So yes, as you say, that you play within the metaverse, across all of the sort of the VR platforms that would includes Oculus as well. And what we did with Golf 5 was to go ahead and completely 3D map the Royal Liverpool. So that was the course for the Open this year. So 3D mapping to create a completely digital twin of the golf course, and that was across every sort of element of detail. So from the slopes on the fairways to the slopes of the greens. So all of the topography, through to actually all of the bunkers, that are out in the course. And bunkers is a massive feature of kind of links golf. But probably the really fun bit was then actually starting to, overlay all of our infrastructure. So, exactly mapping on where we had our grandstand. So our big horseshoe grandstand on 18 to the first tee. We went as far as actually creating the very iconic yellow leaderboards that were on the 18th, to incorporating all of the Open kind of brand and branding, on all aspects. So in reality, what you were getting was, as part of that very kind of, immersive and authentic experience, that you were playing, the ability to play on the course, set up with all of the infrastructure that you would have seen if you'd actually attended, the Open in person, which, I think was really important to both from an R&A perspective and from a kind of Golf 5, that it genuinely felt that the details were really important, that it was an authentic experience. And then what we did, like we do with actually the Open, we ran a series of qualifying events. Those qualifying events were actually played on two of the Golf 5 sort of virtual courses. So they've gone and built a number of virtual courses. So those courses were used for a kind of qualifying series, as we have with our regional and final qualifying for the Open in real life. We then had 4 different categories, because within Golf 5, you can actually kind of create a handicap. So it allows you to come in if you're playing for the first time, or actually if you're a very kind of proficient sort of VR golfer. So we had sort of 4 categories that were competing, and then that sort of funneled down to a VR Open final, again played across Royal Liverpool through that virtual and immersive sort of experience. And as you say, over a sort of a 6-week period, and then we kind of crowned a winner. And now that's kind of come to a kind of a conclusion, but we have actually Royal Liverpool sitting as part of a VR Open zone, so you can go back into the Golf 5 game and actually go on and play Royal Liverpool sort of outside of that. And that's our plan, is to probably work with more of our venues to similarly 3D map those courses, and then to create an annual VR Open, but also to provide the ability for people to go on and have that opportunity to play VR golf on the Open venues around the UK.
I mean, yeah, looked like a brilliant experience, and at least you'd be a bit drier than the final day of the Open this year playing that. So, what was the fan reaction like to it, or the virtual player reaction like to it? Have you got any insight on results? I guess both quantitative, how many people sort of got involved, and what was that? What did that retention look like? But also, I guess, like just qualitative, how did people react to this?
Yeah, I think overall really well, and in some ways, this was a little bit of a step into a bit of a test and learn sort of exercise from our perspective, because I think, as I said earlier, not only purely because of an opportunity for a sort of a fan engagement objective, but because of that wider interest that the R&A has in terms of how VR golf can kind of feature as another means of kind of bringing people into the sport. And so I think when we were assessing what opportunities existed out there, and you start to look at just VR as a subject as well, and I think there's something like 170 million users now on VR. Meta, I think, have now committed publicly to investing 10 billion a year into VR. So I think we were also looking at it from the perspective of VR feels like a very significant opportunity, and whilst golf may only be a small fraction of that it would provide sort of opportunity. So whilst it was a bit of a first step into it, we definitely sort of saw that the opportunity for this over the medium to long term is pretty significant. And even talking to the guys at Golf 5, in terms of what they've seen to date, so I think they've had something like 2.3 million rounds played since they've been live. And then certainly with the VR Open, we saw almost 6,000 rounds that were played during that period of time. That's almost 500,000 shots, that were played. So, in some respects, in the scheme of things, the numbers, still relatively small, but I think the opportunity for that to grow really quite significantly is probably what really excites us. And, and golf is almost, in some respects, really, uniquely placed, because I think other sports are kind of considering what role VR can play. But if you think about something like tennis and football, where you're required, to get that really authentic experience, you're kind of almost required to be able to move. Whereas golf really lends itself because you're playing from a kind of a fixed position. So you get a very authentic experience without that kind of requirement to have to kind of move, but you're still swinging as if you're swinging a golf club normally. So again, we sort of see that golf is actually really kind of uniquely placed within sport to maybe take advantage of that growing trend of more and more people being immersed into VR, into the metaverse as well.
Yeah, that's. I think it's a really good point, and it's probably a good one in terms of how many many kind of, disruptive sports can probably think, what are the, rethink how does participation of sport actually look like? I think it's a challenge that all of us are going to have. Obviously, for all the health benefits, making sure that people continue to participate in real life is super important, but there's no reason why we can't rethink actually what some of these boundaries look like. So let's touch on a little bit of the strategy behind this. Was there an insight from your perspective, from the RNA, that led you to VR as an innovative solution that you wanted to explore? For those reasons that you mentioned, around being accessible and appealing and inclusive, or were you sort of considering a suite of innovative fan engagement tech? Obviously a lot of people have dipped into elements of Web3 or AR or virtual world building. I know like PGA, for example, have gone down that route, which I think there's a session on within Ignition. So yeah, was there a particular insight that led you to VR as being a great solution?
Yeah, so no, I think great question. What I wanted to say, it's probably and coming at it from slightly different angles here. So yes, the piece I've spoken at some length about there around certainly because the RNA operating as a sort of as a governing body, and if you come back to really our principal focus is success for the organization is that point about trying to make the game more accessible, appealing and inclusive, and probably the identification that again, because of course golf seeing such growth and then the role of VR in it, that naturally it felt like it was rich territory for us to explore. But also kind of coming at it from kind of the other side, what we've also seen is that our certainly our the capacities at the Open. So we're now selling out. So we're kind of maxed out in terms of actually people being able to have that opportunity to kind of come and attend. But because we have a real global audience, people that are following the Open all over the world that may never have that opportunity to kind of attend in person. We're trying to find more ways to, connect them to our championship, to our brand, to kind of create those kind of, connected experiences. And so we've seen a range of things that we've done. If it's been, working with EA Sports on, a more traditional golf game, to what we've done around the E Open that was done with the kind of the World kind of Golf Tour, to Golf Clash, so we've seen a number of opportunities to kind of go into, that kind of gamification, digital engagement sort of opportunity, which certainly I think when allows us to kind of engage that kind of more of that global audience that will never have that, maybe that opportunity to kind of come and attend and experience kind of the open in person. So I think that combination of factors has sort of led us to sort of, definitely sort of feel we've seen some successes with what we've done in those other areas. This felt like a natural extension of those opportunities and that strategy, but then also because we see that bigger opportunity of VR golf and what it means about bringing, more people into the game. But again, that point earlier about, a much younger kind of demographic, a much more diverse demographic as well, that lends itself, I think, to also what we're trying to do with that, making the Open have a greater appeal and a sense of accessibility to people, but also making golf as a sport more accessible and appealing as well.
My sort of background or bias comes at things just based on experience, particularly with new tech, but also thinking about how that fuses with partnerships and content, those sorts of realms. And one of the things that I think about with what you guys have done with the VR Open is there's amazing potential here to effectively create new IP and new asset inventory, not just to leverage your activation and partnership that you have with Golf 5, but also bringing your other suite of partners into this, or new partners where they take roles in these new worlds. Is that something that you're thinking about? And is that and if so, is that intentional? Or do you see it as maybe being additive depending on how your experiments go?
Yeah, I think definitely intentional again. So Richard, because of our our desire to continue, for instance, to evolve, our partnership program. And, I think we've been on that journey like a lot of rights holders have, over the last, 4, 5, 6 years, where we probably had a relatively traditional set of assets that would make up our partnership. So, traditional forms of kind of, brand awareness through tee boards and things on the course, through to hospitality and ticketing, through to, some of the sort of activation sort of opportunities, but consciously, as we've developed, how we're trying to reach, different audiences in different ways through different channels and through that sort of digital engagement, and a number of those different initiatives I've sort of talked about. That is also about creating assets that our partners can also be, our partners can be involved in, and can kind of help to invest, either because they can play a credible role in actually, like NTT did, as a technology provider to actually help develop a solution, through to actually just, supporting through investment. So I think it's a very conscious effort to your point, to create a wider set of assets that actually help you to either bring new partners in or to kind of grow and develop, our existing partners.
Last but not least, we'll hear from Ann Devilson from the PGA Tour talking about their partnership with Roblox and what the PGA Tour is doing in the metaverse.
You talked about meeting fans where they are, or new fans, where they already are. So looking at the Roblox partnership for PGA Tour Scramble, was there a clear business case from the get-go that we know we have a core audience of golf fans on the platform and we know that this is an opportunity to engage them? Or is it a sense of this opens up doorways that potentially we haven't had access to, or we haven't had as clear an access to in the past, and that's an exciting opportunity?
Okay. I think it was more the latter. I don't know that we looked at it and saw a gigantic group of core fans, but an opportunity to create some new PGA Tour fans in a demographic that was important to us and our sponsor and FedEx. And that was really around sort of a Gen Z age group. And so it was an opportunity to bring our game there in sort of a new, fun way.
So for those watching who may not have heard of PGA Tour Scramble, what is it and how does it work?
So PGA Tour Scramble is an immersive experience on Roblox. It launched just before our FedEx Cup playoffs. Fans who enter the experience can play one of our 3 playoff holes. So what we did was we picked a hole from each playoff event. So we have number 11 from TPC Southwind, number 16 from Olympia Fields, and number 15 at East Lake. And as they're playing, one of the sort of distinguishing factors and one of the ways we wanted to kind of take this to a next level with Roblox in a way that hadn't been done before was we integrated live data. So if you had gone into the TPC Southwind hole while the FedEx St. Jude Championship was going on, you would have encountered golf balls flying into view that were from actual balls being hit at TPC Southwind. So that was the first time Roblox had integrated live data. They were a great partner with us, helping us make some adjustments on the fly to make that possible. But it allowed us to bring sort of our live competition together in this really fun Roblox environment, and hopefully kind of create a door into our playoffs for these fans. But it wasn't just our strict competition. It wasn't just, exactly how you would encounter it if you happen to go in person in TPC Southwind. We did also integrate some fun critters and obstacles for our fans. They encountered walls, tornadoes, gophers, alligators along the way as they were trying to get the ball into the hole. So just kind of a fun twist on a period in our season that we wanted to highlight.
One thing I know that was in the press release is footage of, as you say, people playing with real-time golf balls. As someone like a Rory McIlroy might be hitting onto the green, you can go and interact with that ball in real time, which I can imagine caused quite a bit of carnage when it happened. So since that the game is launched, how have you seen the take up and how have you seen the sort of engagement levels with that?
The engagement level has been great. I think during live play, we saw a great uptick in engaged users, concurrent users, engaged time as fans were trying to interact with these players and their golf balls as they came in. The other part of it that was important on the platform was some UGC that we created. So obviously a big part of Roblox is the avatars that players have, right? And the ability to outfit them and show off their own personality. So we worked with Trigger XR to create the game and to create some really cool hats that were sort of in a golf tradition, but a little fun sort of skew to them. So I think at the end of that video, you saw a plaid sort of flat hat and sort of that Payne Stewart style. But there was also a rainbow snapback, a bucket hat, and an aqua color. And they were very popular with the fan base. So the way that worked was we created what they call sort of a UGC drop moment and released those hats to the audience. And that's where we really saw the most engagement. Users had to come into the game, complete a hole in order to qualify to get the hat. And we saw some really big spikes and a lot of sort of positive organic content and videos on YouTube that were created around that as gamers were trying to score their hat.
So you've touched on the apparel side. How much input does the tour have in terms of the game design and the apparel design? I know that you mentioned. So when collaborating with the developer, what's the balance between, the creative control, I guess?
We have complete creative control working with Trigger XR. They are, a wonderful partner in doing a lot of innovative experience for us. And they have brought a lot of creative ideas, especially around the hat designs. But we all sort of work hand in hand, and not just with our partner, our developing partner, but also FedEx. They were totally bought in and along for the ride as we, sent them a lot of mock-ups of alligators and gophers and hats, and making sure that while, they are things that are true to golf, you do encounter alligators out there. They were presented in sort of this fun way that was going to make it exciting for the fans.
I think anyone who's seen Happy Gilmore will definitely know the role alligators can play on a golf course.
Right.
But maybe a reference that hopefully some people will get. One thing that you mentioned there was the need for players to play a hole before they're able to access that sort of apparel drop. I'm interested to know, when it comes to audience acquisition, how you get that critical mass on the Roblox platform to engage with that type of content. Obviously, the core golf audience may not be, regular Roblox users and vice versa. So how is it that you're able to sort of promote and market that collaboration effectively?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is leaning into the Roblox platform, and with the UGC drops, there is just sort of this community of Roblox users who are hunting the platform for them. And it was a way to get some users who probably wouldn't have just organically gone, let me go try the PGA Tour's game, into the game to have some fun with it. So I think part of it really did just happen organically. The other part is, engaging in the groups feature in Roblox and updating our fans on when these things were coming. When you look at sort of the overlap of, our core fans and Roblox users, there's not a lot there. So using our sort of traditional marketing levers really wasn't going to work. We had to kind of go where the Roblox users were within the platform and sort of the supporting platforms, whether that was YouTube or the groups feature that they have on the platform.
And in terms of understanding that audience, how much data are you able to access in terms of the type of person that's been engaging with the experience? And if so, who are they? What is the type of fan that you've seen?
Yeah, I think Roblox has pretty robust analytics. So, we went into it hoping to capture more of a Gen Z audience. And I think we're pretty successful at that. More than 50% of the fans who have engaged with our game are under the age of 17. So that was great to see. It was a very global audience too. While there was a large amount of United States players, it did span the globe, probably close to 50-50 as well. And it was sort of about 60-30 male to female too. So I think we were pretty happy to see that we were capturing something a little bit outside of what we see in our core audience on our broadcast or our more traditional channels.
And the experience was tied, of course, to the tournament itself. And we talked about the value of having that real-time data and almost combining the live event with the digital world. In terms of engagement with the game, did you see a particular spike around that live event where people really engaged with the players playing simultaneously, or has it been a bit more sort of stable in terms of the engagement numbers?
I think, yeah, the spikes really were around the live play and around the UGC drops. There is definitely a steady drumbeat within the game, which is great to see. Fans just coming in to continue to play. But those sort of differentiating moments, I think, were what really drew the fan in. And as we look, Roblox is not a platform that you can kind of make your game and walk away. I think the fan base there really expects continuous sort of evolution and new things to experience to kind of keep that engagement going. So as we look forward, and now that we're sort of through our playoffs, I think that will be a focus as, you know, what is the next hole or the next twist on competition or apparel that we may want to integrate into the game.
And are there clear plans in terms of what that next step looks like?
In the midst, very much in the midst. Our season just ended and the FedEx Cup fall is just getting started. So wanted to take a beat to kind of review results and see what the best path forward is.
Before you go, myself and Nick would just like to thank you for tuning into this episode of StreamTime. If you found the episode insightful, please make sure you like and subscribe on whichever platform you listen to. As a growing podcast, we'd greatly appreciate your support in sharing or writing a review. Ultimately, we want this podcast to not only entertain you, but also hopefully help you navigate the digital sports landscape. If you have any feedback on previous episodes or any topics and speakers you'd like to hear from in the future, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can find myself and Nick Meacham on LinkedIn or on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @SportsProChris1. Nick can be found @SportsProNick. Of course, if you want to stay fully up to date on the sports business news cycle, please make sure to visit the Sports Pro Media website or sign up to one of our several newsletters to make sure you don't miss anything. Once again, thank you, and we look forward to you joining us next week on the StreamTime podcast.